I wanted accountability. Later that week, my mother called and threatened to publicly destroy my reputation if I didn't drop the case. I responded calmly that she had destroyed our family many years ago on that rainy night when I was a child. I ended the call, knowing the truth was now stronger than her story. Meanwhile, Thomas prepared the full legal package, including the will, psychiatric report, police records, diaries, and message logs, building a case that left little room for doubt. Thomas reminded me that the courtroom would likely be crowded. Margaret's church group, local neighbors, and even reporters might attend. I told him I didn't mind. When truth is spoken openly, it carries more weight. That night in the hotel, I opened the oak box again. I had already read most of my grandfather's diaries, but at the bottom I found something I had missed. It was a small savings book for a college education fund. The account name was Willow Frell, opened on the day I was born, with a final deposit made 3 months before my grandfather passed away. On the last page he had written in careful engineer-style handwriting, "For the nest you will build yourself." Holding that book, I understood something deeply. My grandfather had never forgotten me, not even for a single day. Even when I felt abandoned, someone had quietly built support beneath my life so I wouldn't fall completely into hardship. I often wonder if you have ever discovered later that someone loved you silently and worked behind the scenes to protect you. Sometimes the greatest care is the one that is never spoken out loud. I closed the box, set my alarm, and prepared my clothes for court. The next morning, the truth would be presented before many witnesses. At Hartford Probate Court, Courtroom 3B, the hearing began at 9:15 a.m. The room was crowded. Margaret's church friends sat on one side, whispering quietly, while Mrs. Boyd, Grace, 2 newspaper reporters, a sketch artist, and several Glastonbury neighbors filled the rest of the room. Margaret sat at the respondents' table wearing a black dress and silver cross, holding a crumpled tissue in her hand while her lawyer organized papers. Her attorney argued that my grandfather was mentally confused and influenced by others when he signed the will. He repeated words like isolated and uncertain to weaken the document's credibility. Thomas responded by presenting the psychiatric evaluation to the judge, showing that Dr. Alan Fielding had confirmed Grandpa Walter's full mental competence just 2 weeks before the will was signed. Then Thomas read from my grandfather's diary, sharing the entry from November 14, 2003, describing the night I was forced out. The courtroom became completely silent as the words were spoken. Margaret suddenly stood and shouted that it was a lie, but the judge ordered her to sit. Mrs. Boyd was called to testify next. She described seeing a young girl walking alone in the rain with a garbage bag, called police that night, and heard Margaret tell the officer that I had left voluntarily to stay with relatives. Mrs. Boyd looked directly at my mother and said the truth was different. During a short recess, my mother approached me and grabbed my wrist, whispering that I was destroying her life. Her voice carried no acting, only anger and fear. I looked at her hand on my arm and gently moved it away, one finger at a time. Then I met her eyes and said, "I don't want revenge. I just want the truth to be heard." The judge returned to the courtroom and everyone fell silent again. Thomas presented the final evidence, including the psychiatric report and the testimony records of Dr. Alan Fielding and Martha Bowen, the town librarian. Both were still alive and confirmed the long, carefully maintained custody of the documents over the past 2 decades. The judge spent about 8 minutes reviewing the case, carefully studying every file. Finally, he announced that Walter H. Ashford's will was valid and properly executed. I was officially recognized as the sole beneficiary of the estate. Margaret's head slowly lowered. It was not a dramatic performance this time, just the weight of reality. Her shoulders slumped, and her lawyer tried to comfort her, but she pushed his hand away. The church members watching did not move to comfort her either. Thomas then introduced evidence related to the criminal case against Dean Frell, including messages showing conspiracy planning with Victor. The texts clearly showed instructions to make the situation look accidental and discussions about a backup plan. The courtroom heard the exact words Dean sent, including the message to my mother saying they might need the backup option. The judge noted that Dean's criminal solicitation case would continue separately, with a possible sentence of up to 20 years. He warned Margaret that her communications could also be reviewed by prosecutors and advised her to speak with her lawyer. She sat motionless, staring at the table as if realizing the story she had built for years was collapsing around her. As I walked past her, she whispered that I had won. I didn't answer. This was never about victory. Outside the courthouse, the bright September sun felt strangely normal. Life kept moving. Cars passed, people ate lunch across the street, and a reporter approached me with a microphone. She asked what I wanted to say after everything that had happened. I answered that what mattered was the future. I spoke about my grandfather who built houses and opportunities during his life, and how he continued building even after his death by leaving me a path forward. I shared that his home in Glastonbury would become a transitional residence for young people leaving foster care. I called it Ashford Nest, honoring both my grandfather's work and my grandmother's advice to build a safe place of my own. When asked about my mother, I said it was a private family matter. Forgiveness is not something rushed, I explained, but boundaries are a choice, and I had already made mine. Grace stood a few steps behind me, folding her arms and smiling in her usual quiet way, more with her expression than with words. She nodded once, giving me strength without speaking. Thomas shook my hand at the bottom of the courthouse steps and said my grandfather would be proud of how I handled everything. I know, I replied. As the reporter walked away, Mrs. Boyd gently touched my arm and said she wanted to volunteer at Ashford Nest because she felt she owed me 21 years of silence. She added that 3 other neighbors had also witnessed what happened long ago but were too afraid of Margaret to speak. Now they wanted to help correct the past and stand openly for the truth. 1 week later, Margaret asked to meet me through Thomas since I had blocked her number after the trial. I agreed to talk in a public, neutral place, a small coffee shop on Main Street in Glastonbury called Bean and Spoke. Grace came with me and sat at a nearby table pretending to read a magazine held upside down. Margaret arrived without makeup, without jewelry, and without the confident image she used to show others. She looked exhausted, like someone who had not slept properly for many nights and had aged faster under pressure. She sat across from me and said she was sorry. I asked her to be specific because general apologies were not enough for me. She began crying quietly without performance or attention from anyone. I watched carefully but could not tell whether the tears were true sadness or simply old habits. Then I realized it did not really matter anymore. I told her I would not pursue additional criminal action because anger was draining, not because I felt mercy. I warned her clearly that she must never contact me, visit Ashford Nest, or speak publicly about me. Any violation would allow Thomas to pursue conspiracy charges. I stood, placed $8 on the table to cover both coffees, and put on my jacket. She said, "You are still my daughter." I replied that she had chosen not to be my mother, and I had accepted that truth. I walked to the door and left without looking back. Outside, the October air felt sharp and clean against my face, like waking from a long dream. Grace caught up beside me and asked if I was all right. I said no, but I would be someday. We walked silently toward the car. Through the cafe window, Margaret sat alone at a table meant for 2, her drinks untouched, staring into a future she could not rewrite. 3 months later, Dean's criminal trial ended with a plea agreement. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and his associate Victor cooperated with investigators in exchange for a lighter sentence. Dean admitted guilt to criminal solicitation and received an 8-year prison sentence, with parole possible after 5 years. Victor received a 12-year sentence. I attended the sentencing hearing. Dean wore a county jumpsuit and carried the expression of someone slowly realizing his life would not follow the path he had imagined. Before the officers escorted him away, he looked at me and said he only wanted the money he needed. There was no apology. I did not respond. I sat quietly and listened as the judge closed the case record. Later, I walked through the courthouse hallway that smelled faintly of waxed floors and old coats. Margaret was not prosecuted. The message she sent was considered legally ambiguous, and the district attorney chose not to pursue conspiracy charges due to insufficient evidence. Still, the public already judged the situation, and the story of what happened had become part of local memory. Margaret's church community slowly removed her from volunteer work, and neighbors stopped answering her calls. The image she had built over 20 years, the story of a devoted mother and a difficult daughter who ran away, faded once people learned the truth. Within a month she sold the Sunset Terrace house and moved alone to a small apartment in Clearwater, Florida. Rachel Dunn's investigation also revealed that Amber Jennings was not really Dean's long-term partner. They had met on a dating app only a few months before the vacation trip. Phone records showed Amber sent Dean a photo of my passport and travel details on the first night I arrived at the resort, which is how Dean learned my room number. That information would have allowed Victor to find me. Amber was never charged and simply disappeared from the story after the case ended. 6 months after the trial, the Hubbard Street house was restored. 14 volunteers helped, along with a contractor who offered a discount after reading the newspaper article. We repainted the entire house, repaired the porch floor, fixed the kitchen faucet Grandpa had delayed repairing for years, sanded the wooden floors, patched walls, and hung clean new curtains in every room. I kept Grandpa's old desk in the living room. On it I placed the framed photo of Rosemary and me, the oak box with his diaries, and a cup of black coffee each morning even though no one drank it. Mrs. Boyd managed daily operations of the home, and 4 other neighbors joined the volunteer board. Many of them had once believed Margaret's version of events but now brought food, cleaning supplies, and quiet regret for staying silent for so long. Grace became the health advisor and visited from Boston every 2 weeks, checking supplies and reorganizing the medicine cabinet whenever she felt it needed improvement. My company, Hartheim, supported the home by providing technology that matched each resident with trained mentors through our platform. We opened the home with 3 teenagers who needed a safe place to live and grow. There was no media event, just a small gathering in the living room where my grandfather once read newspapers. I told them that this house belonged to a man who believed every person deserved another chance. He gave me that chance first and now it was theirs. One girl named Lily, 16 years old with short hair and crossed arms, asked me quietly if my own family had also forced me out. I told her yes. She then asked if I had turned out okay. I thought carefully before answering because I wanted honesty, not comfort. I said that I became someone who tells the truth, and that being honest is more important than simply feeling successful or happy. She relaxed her arms slightly after hearing that, and I noticed it happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. While cleaning Grandpa's closet behind the oak box and under old paperwork, I found a sealed manila envelope labeled, "For Willow when she is ready." Inside were 17 legal petitions Grandpa had filed to obtain guardianship of me between 2003 and 2012. Each petition was rejected because Margaret argued that Walter Ashford was too old, too unwell, or unable to provide a stable home. The same objections were repeated every year, even though Grandpa kept trying to protect me and give me a safe place to grow. The documents showed how hard he fought to keep me close. Even when the system kept saying no, that I sat on the closet floor with the 17 custody petitions spread around me like cards that had fallen from a broken deck. Grandpa had gone to court for me 17 times, and each time my mother worked to block him. He never told me about those battles because he wanted me to grow up without carrying that burden. Thomas later explained that Grandpa believed I would fight harder for my future if I felt free instead of pressured by the past. He once said, "Let her believe she is free. That will give her strength to keep moving forward." Inside the 9th petition from 2005, I found an affidavit signed by my father, Robert Frell, who had left when I was very young. He supported Grandpa Walter's custody request with just one signature and then disappeared from my life again without contact. I am still unsure what that means for me emotionally, but for the first time I thought of my father not as someone who left, but simply as a person who was also lost. Beneath the petitions was the last letter Grandpa wrote to me. It had no date or signature, as if he had started writing and never finished. The letter said he had failed in 17 court attempts but would not fail in his final promise. He left everything to me so I could build a safe home for myself and others, something he was never able to create fully. I held the letter close, closed my eyes, and allowed myself to cry quietly, feeling like I was finally releasing years of hidden sadness. 3 months after Ashford Nest opened, Mrs. Boyd called to tell me that my mother was standing across the street, simply watching the house from the sidewalk. I walked outside and saw Margaret wearing a plain beige coat and simple shoes, without makeup or her cross necklace. She looked like someone who had returned to a place that had moved forward without her. She spoke first, saying that Grandpa had given the house to me and to children who needed safety. She reminded me that she had grown up in that same house but was forced to leave mine. I stayed on my side of the street while she stood on hers, both of us carrying memories but choosing different meanings from them. A small wind pushed dried leaves slowly between us as I heard Lily helping a new resident inside find the bathroom. Margaret asked if she could enter the house just once. I stayed silent for several seconds, remembering rain, a garbage bag, and the day she told someone to keep me because she did not want me. I thought about the letters, the legal battles, and every room in my life she tried to control. Then I said no because Ashford Nest was meant to be a safe space for others, not a place where old wounds were reopened. She nodded quietly, not crying, just accepting the answer with the tired look of someone who already expected it. She turned and walked slowly down Hubbard Street with her hands in her pockets and did not look back. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. Lily later asked who the woman was, and I told her she was someone who lost something she could never regain. I went inside and closed the door. 1 year later, the house on Hubbard Street is never completely silent. Someone is always cooking late at night, playing music upstairs, or sitting at the kitchen table studying and believing they can build a better future. The home is not perfect or tidy, but it is alive with second chances and people learning how to stand again. It's the kind of place where beauty shows itself in small lived-in details, little scuffs on the baseboards, notes stuck to the fridge, and a chore chart that nobody follows perfectly but everyone tries to respect. 14 teenagers have lived at Ashford Nest so far. 6 have moved into their own apartments. 2 are attending community college and 1 earned a full scholarship to Central Connecticut State. The rest are still here, learning at their own pace that safety doesn't mean everything must be perfect. Hartheim has now helped create over 3,000 mentor matches in the latest quarter. I divide my time between San Francisco and Glastonbury, living between 2 cities because both are part of my life's work. In the spring I began therapy. I understand the irony. The woman who built a company worth around $47 million from a dorm room did not immediately realize she needed emotional healing. For years I treated endurance as if it were the same as recovery. My therapist, Dr. Tran, is a calm, thoughtful woman who prefers herbal tea and gently stops me when I try to avoid difficult feelings. She taught me that surviving pain is not the same as feeling truly well. Strength, she said, does not mean being unhurt. It means learning to heal openly. I'm still practicing that lesson. Grace visits Glastonbury every 2 weeks. We cook in Grandpa's kitchen using Rosemary's old recipes: pot roast, cornbread, and peach cobbler that never comes out perfect but always tastes like comfort. I placed a new photograph on the refrigerator showing Grace, Mrs. Boyd, Thomas, Lily, the Ashford Nest children, and me standing together on the front porch, laughing in the middle of a spontaneous moment. No one planned that picture, and it is the thing I treasure most. One Tuesday, Thomas called and asked me to visit his Hartford office because he had something important to give me. He had never invited me in person before. Most of our communication had been through calls and electronic signatures. I drove to his small second-floor office above a sandwich shop in downtown Hartford, a simple place that matched his practical personality. He was waiting by the window when I entered. On his desk lay a cream-colored envelope with my name written in Grandpa's slightly uneven handwriting. Thomas told me that Grandpa had left one final letter with strict instructions to deliver it exactly 1 year after the court confirmed the will. That day was today. I sat down and opened the envelope. The letter began, "Dear little bird, if you are reading this, it means you survived. I always believed you would." Grandpa apologized for not being there longer but reminded me that love is not defined by family blood, but by the choice to keep caring. He said I had shown strength by continuing to live, to be kind, and to build instead of destroying the world around me. He left everything to me not because I needed wealth, but because he trusted I would use it responsibly. He advised me not to hate my mother forever because she carried burdens he could not remove, but also told me to keep healthy boundaries. "Build your nest and fill it with people who choose you back," he wrote. He ended by saying he chose me every single day, even when I didn't know it. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my jacket near my heart. I thanked Grandpa quietly for everything he had done for me. Thomas removed his glasses, cleaned them with his tie, and said it had been the honor of his career to help me. We shook hands and I held his hand slightly longer than usual. He allowed it. I walked down the stairs into the afternoon light, carrying the letter from the man who had chosen me every day of my life. That evening at Ashford Nest, dinner was simple spaghetti made by a 17-year-old resident named Marcus, who insisted he followed the recipe correctly even though it was a little overcooked. No one complained because home is not about perfect meals. It is about people who stay. After dinner, 2 children argued loudly about basketball scores while Lily quietly grabbed a piece of garlic bread from someone's plate, laughing when Mrs. Boyd reminded everyone to use napkins. Later, Lily found me in the hallway using her laptop and asked, "Can you help me write my college essay?" I asked her what the topic was and she said a little shyly, "The people who saved me." I sat beside her and said she could also write about the person she became because of those people, because sometimes that is a stronger story. She didn't reply right away, just thought for a moment, then opened the laptop and began typing slowly and carefully. Later that night I sat alone on the front porch, the same wooden steps Grandpa used when he drank black coffee from his mug that read "World's Okay, Grandpa," while waving to Mrs. Boyd across the street. I looked down Hubbard Street, the road I once walked while carrying a wet garbage bag in the rain at 11 years old, my shoes filled with water. It was also the road Margaret walked months ago with her hands in her pockets, leaving without looking back, and the road Grandpa carried me down the night I arrived at his house. The street itself had not changed much, but I had changed inside. I took out my phone and looked at the photo of Rosemary and me when I was 5, both of us laughing as if the world were always kind. On the back of the picture were the words written in pencil, "You were always enough." I turned off the screen, leaned back, and breathed in the cold evening air of Glastonbury while the stars above quietly appeared one by one, never asking permission but always showing up anyway. This is my story, and it is not wrapped neatly or made to look perfect. My brother is in prison. My mother lives alone in Florida. I do not hate them, but I also do not invite them into my home. What I learned after walking 3 miles in the rain as a child and spending years trying to understand that night is this. You are not required to stay loyal to people who confuse control with love. You are not required to forgive on someone else's schedule, and you are never obligated to stay silent to protect people who would not protect you. If your family makes you feel small or makes you believe you are difficult to love, hear this clearly. Walking away is not betrayal, setting boundaries is not cruelty, and building a life they never planned for you is not revenge.